right, hi everybody. The part I'll be reading today is from my character Maeve's point of view. She is a Gorgon who has lived in isolation her entire life in order to avoid turning people to stone. Well, she does live with a companion snake named Rowan, and lately some unruly members of the kingdom have grown curious about her. So in the scene I'll be reading today, some of those people have managed to find where Maeve lives. Wound under the kitchen table, Rowan curled tighter, emitting a low hiss. Maeve looked up. What is it? She stilled, listening. An owl hooted and the wind rustled the leaves outside. The rain had stopped an hour ago and a faint drip fell from the outer edge of her roof onto the ground outside. Otherwise, she didn't hear anything. She met Rowan's gaze. You're imagining things again, she told him. His tongue flickered, but she returned to her reading, pulling the blanket up around her knees. She appreciated her companion snake, but sometimes he was too vigilant. Like when he accompanied her to the river, he always seemed to be on edge, his body tight and ready to return as soon as her bucket was filled. She valued his keen sense of movement, but he could be entirely too uptight. If he were human, she imagined he would be somebody with wide eyes always darting around, and fingers that constantly wrung together, worrying about each minute sound. She laughed at the image as Rowan rested his head atop his coils, staring at her. She shook her head. This time, a distant snap caught her attention. She paused, listening. Rowan hissed, and she held up a finger. I don't want you to be right. Nearly a minute passed, and there was no further noise. She exhaled, but a louder rustling broke through the brush outside. A deer, surely, she whispered to Rowan, as he slithered forward, his head lifting as if to scan the higher ground he couldn't see. She stepped off her bed and crouched near the door. Her heart sank at the familiar sound of footsteps, more than she'd ever heard before. Nightingales sang from their nests, and Maeve could hear the protest of her fen as the intruders approached. Branches snapped beneath heavy boots. The padded feet of animals scurried as they found their burrows. The fairy nest buzzed louder. Maybe it's just a group of children, she said, though the parched feeling in her throat told her that was wishful thinking. Quickly, she blew out all but one of the candles, leaving it on the table before moving to stand beside the window to the right of her door. She pressed her back and palms against the stone, her cheek resting on the wall as she listened. This is where the witch lives. Oh, gods, Dane. There was a sound like several voices congratulating each other, and Maeve's spine pricked with anxiety when she tried to pinpoint how many people Dane had brought with him. She heard the familiar voice of the woman, high and loud. Swallowing, she crawled over to her bed and grabbed the same shard of glass she'd used to see outside before. Moving back to her standing position, she took a deep breath as the sounds grew closer. Then she held up the glass and looked. Maeve's stomach dropped. There were at least 7, maybe more, villagers standing just inside the edge of her fen. She found Dane, one of the tallest, standing at the front of the group. Half of them carried torches that threw shadows over their cloaks and faces. The same woman now gripped a staff, and 2 of the other villagers carried crossbows. Each wore a look like a rabid wolf that had just found its prey. Come out, witch, Dane's voice was echoed by the others, followed by ruckus shouts and angry jeers. Swiftly, she grabbed the rope and pulled, prompting the bells to clang. A few of the villagers shouted in surprise, but she grimaced when Dane called out to them. It's merely a trick, a spell of the witch's conjuring. More cries, then the woman called, let him go. Maeve's jaw clenched and she rescanned the glass. One of them had fled, but that still left more people to deal with than she cared for. Dane kept the group on the edge of her fen, away from the chopping stump where her main snare lay. She had 2 others set up, one near her door and the other on the opposite side from where they stood, shouting at her home. Rowan slithered up her leg, wrapping around her calf and knee. He hissed angrily. Well, I don't know what to do either. Maeve tried to keep her voice low, but when she checked the glass again, the group was now only 20 paces from her front door. They were laughing. One picked up a cauldron and chucked it toward her baskets of acorns, scattering her collection across the grass. She stood, terrified. She'd never had to deal with this many people before. Her mother had prepared snares, showed her how to frighten away humans if they got too close. But the most they'd ever had to deal with was 3, like the time when Dane had first appeared. She didn't understand him. Why was he so angry with her? Why did he insist on saying she was a witch? Maybe if I tell them I'm not, they'll leave me alone, Maeve said. Rowan gave his head a slight shake. What other choice do I have? Steeling herself, she stood closer to the window, cupping her hands but keeping her eyes trained on the lone candle flickering atop the table. She shouted, "Please, leave me alone. I'm not a witch." "Liar," one of the villagers called back. She recognized Dane's voice next. "She snared me. She caught me to flay me alive and would have eaten me for breakfast if I hadn't escaped." "No," she shouted, "that's not true. I just want to be left alone." "Only witches live alone." "Now that simply can't be true," she said under her breath, grimacing to Rowan. Her heart was beating so fast, she clutched her chest in a fruitless effort to quell its rapid pace. Her breathing came quickly, then in short, harried bursts. Her chest felt tight. Gods, what was she going to do? With a trembling hand, she held the shard up to see the group, now a mass of leering and looming shadows in the dark night. Dane's voice bellowed maliciously. "What do we do to witches in this kingdom?" The woman sneered and shouted, "Burn her. Burn the witch." Thank you.